Hello there, McKenna here, and I'm back with um, a talk on terminal illness. And specifically today, I would like to talk about grief. So please let me know where you are joining me from. And the first question that I have for you is, when you hear the word grief, what comes to mind? When you hear someone is grieving or you hear the word grief, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? I ask that you can type on the comment what that answer is. What is grief? When does grief happen? Let me know what you think. But oftentimes, when people hear the word grief, the first thing they think of is somebody died. Grief is culturally so attached to death that we fail to recognize that grief is part of life. In many, many aspects of life, there's grief. The loss of a job can cause or does cause grief. Loss of a friendship comes with grief. So grief is not only related to death, there's many other reasons in life that we grieve. And if we can be aware of grief and what grief means, we can help one another better. And we can also deal with grief a lot better than when we have misconceptions, because oftentimes people suffer a lot because we don't realize that there's many things in life that cause grief. And oftentimes we think that we're just whining or just get over it. But grief is real and grief needs to be tended to. So one of the things or a major aspect of terminal illness is the grief that is involved, that comes with it. And again, terminal illness is the diagnosis when the doctors say there's nothing else we can do. We've tried everything we know to do. And at this point, there is nothing else we can do. Usually, according to studies, the doctors are expecting that a person will die within the next 6 months or so. So death is in the foreseeable future. When that happens, grief sets in. And the initial reaction of majority of people, I want to say almost all people, but the vast majority is shock. So studies show that even people, and when I talk of terminal illness, my greatest focus of these charts is especially the elderly. I know terminal illness happens even with children, but my major focus is on caring for our elderly parents. So grief happens even when people have lived their entire life. Sometimes you might wonder why would a 95-year-old grieve so much about hearing they are dying? It's because death was not in the original plan of God for humanity, and the 95-year-old is a human being. So people grieve when they hear that death is coming soon. We build our life here on earth and we like our life. Even people who struggle, they like their life. There are people who they don't know what they are going to eat tomorrow, but they still love their life because God gave us life and we love life. As human beings, we love our life. So whenever there's the mention of foreseeable death, there is grief. The reason it's important to talk about grief is there is extreme differences in how people deal with grief. So in the equation where someone is diagnosed with terminal illness, the person that is diagnosed with terminal illness is grieving. They are thinking of their loved ones, their children, their grandchildren, because grandparents want to see what's going to happen with my grandchild. I want to see them get married. I want to see them have children. I want to see my children have children. And so we always want something we want to see in the future about this life on earth. And finding out that that might be impossible brings a lot of grief with it. Now, the person diagnosed with the disease is grieving. Guess what? The family members and friends, people that are close to that person, are also grieving. So you have multiple people that are grieving at the same time. And that's important to be aware of because based on exposure, people grieve differently. And the other aspect of it is based on what stage of grief a person is. You'll see people behaving differently. So grief has 5 stages. There is the denial, there is anger, there is bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So when people are diagnosed, there is the initial shock, either of this can't be, this is not true, this cannot happen. There's no way this is happening. And there's that initial shock. Actually, the shock is almost like a frozen state. Did I hear right? And then usually it's followed by the denial of no, this cannot be happening. I feel fine. I don't feel like I'm going to die. And many people feel that way, denial. And then some people might become very angry. They might become angry with God. They might become angry with their family members. And some people can become very angry because sometimes people feel like they are betrayed by God, they are betrayed by their family members. And the other thing is, many times when people are diagnosed with terminal illness, it's important to get proper counseling because many people think I'm gonna die like tomorrow. But actually, some people live with terminal illness for a year, 2 years, 3 years. So it's important to get proper counseling, that being diagnosed with a terminal disease does not mean you are dying instantly right now. the person still has life ahead of them. So it's important to get proper counseling so that people can live their best life in the remaining time on earth. And by the way, it's important not to give up. And one of the things I want to share is that because of how resilient human beings are, it's necessary. It's not just okay, it's necessary that doctors tell people the truth. So one of the things that I experienced in Kenya is doctors don't tell people the truth. And I have heard myths like when you tell people that they have a terminal disease, they die more quickly or they die instantly. If somebody dies instantly, it's because that's how bad the disease was. There are people who are diagnosed when they are dying because it's too late. But they are not dying because they were told they have a terminal disease. People get shocked, but they get past the initial shock and they live on because God wired us with extreme resilience. So it's important not to hide from people when what's going on with their bodies. It's important to tell people the truth. Um, so the other reason that it's important to I don't feel very well today. So if you're noticing my voice is a little different, is because it is actually different. So with the stages of grief, there's denial, there's bargaining. Bargaining is a stage down the road where people are feeling, well, I mean, you go past anger, denial, and this, could it really be true that I'm gonna die? And they might wake up the next day and say, no, there's no way I'm dying. I'm gonna fight this. I'm gonna really live. And then the next day they might wake up and say, no, I can feel it. This is not normal. Mm-mm. So people go through this stage of bargaining. Family members, if without understanding, they get very confused. There's also stages of the dying process that we won't be talking about. But if you don't understand all these changes, so with terminal illness, there are certain symptoms that happen when people are approaching death. And these certain symptoms happen sometimes based on the disease. For example, somebody who has end-stage dementia will have a downward curve, a very slow downward steady curve. While somebody with a heart disease will go plateau, boom, down. Sometimes they might even come a little up and then plateau and then boom, down. And it's like a staircase. So when you go with family members, depending on the disease, sometimes they see this bump down and they panic. And then the person larries and they start to get a little bit better. But what family members don't notice is that this person doesn't go back where they were here. They might get a little bit better. And all of a sudden, the family is saying, "Who, my loved one is better. They are doing better. God has performed a miracle. They are not going to die. They are getting better." But the fact is, they are not getting better. That's part of the process of dying. So, which, as I was saying, you read and understand the specific disease and what to expect. Because when you understand, then you're not going in roller coaster. When they go like this, you panic, and then you, oh, it's going great, and then boom, and you just go this roller coaster of up and waves. But when you have an understanding of how the disease behaves, you can be more calm, and you can be more settled, and you can be more helpful in understanding that those bumps don't mean the person is getting well. Now, miracles. What I'm going to challenge you to think about is how many people, I'm not saying there's nobody, because I've seen somebody who um, had end-stage cancer, was dying, and God healed them, and they lived another 10 years. And when they finally died, they didn't die of that cancer. But that's very rare. I want you to think about, of the people that have been diagnosed with end-stage disease, they are elderly. How many have you seen get a miracle and they live? I'm going to leave that up to you to think about it. Here is the thing: God can extend life, but God doesn't perform half miracles. So when God extends life and somebody is still suffering, they're in pain, they can't eat, they are suffering, that is not a miracle. That is still the dying process. But we are quick to say, oh, God did a miracle. If God does a miracle, when we think of the Bible and the miracles that Jesus did, or if you think of Elisha when he healed the little boy that had died, just think of the miracles in the Bible. Those people actually wake up and they live their normal life, but they still die because that's normal for all of us. So grief is huge. A lot of family members fight when their loved one is dying. There's extreme family dynamics. And part of the fights that happen in the home is because of the grief process. So it's important to understand grief process, and it's important to understand that people could be grieving very differently. Number one, because of exposure. Some people might have better understanding of what's going on than others. And then some people might be in denial, while others are in the anger stage. Why is God taking my mom? I wanted my mom to be here when this happens. Why would God take my mom? Or there's no way my mom is dying. I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna make sure she lives. But somebody else might be in the bargaining stage and saying, well, I think I can see signs. It is possible that mom is dying, but, and then another person might have accepted. So in my family, when my mom was going through the dying process, I grieved a lot before she died. I actually grieved a lot before she died than after she died, because for a long time I knew that it was coming. But in my family, I had family members that viewed me as a cold-hearted person. She's cold-hearted. How can she say mom is dying? Mom is not dying. So the reason that I was gracious and the reason that I didn't join in the camp is because I have worked with many families that were like my family. And I've seen all family members be all over the map. Some are angry, Some are in negotiating, some have accepted, and those who are angry, and here's the thing, the anger stage, the denial stage are not the healthy stages of dealing with grief. They are not healthy. These people don't have a sober mind when they are going through those stages. And these are the people that tend to think that the person who has accepted, that's the final stage of grief. And sometimes people go through these stages differently. Sometimes there's more acceptance, and then there's this kick of a little upward, and now it's a little negotiation again. Oh my gosh, maybe they are gonna leave. Maybe something is really happening. So people can be all over the map. And because of that, family members can have major dynamics where people fight others. Some of my family members were actually not happy when I came home to be with my mom because they were viewing me as the angel of death. She is here, and so God will not hear our prayers. It's best if she's not here. So I'm sharing this very candidly because these are things I've dealt with a lot of families. And if you get the understanding of how terminal illness goes, you can be very helpful for your family. Some of the things like doing blood work, doing tests at the end. A person, when the body is shutting down, the organs are shutting down, no matter how much you do labs, it's not gonna help prolong their life because what happens is the organs are shutting down, and the the body is just doing its thing. So people will take labs to see what's going on with hemoglobin, what's going on with electrolytes, what's going on with this, with that. And then they panic because the electrolytes are all over the map. Now, what do we do to control the electrolytes? That's why in hospice, many families are advised you don't need to keep doing the labs. Just help your loved one to be comfortable because you look at these electrolytes, and when you think of the changes with the electrolytes and you compare with somebody that is not sick, it will alarm you, it will make you feel bad, it will make you feel desperate, it will make you feel like I need to do something. I saw my family go through that. And I tried to tell them, we don't need to do labs. There's no point of keeping poking my mom with needles. It's not going to solve anything. And some of my family members got mad at me. So I share this because if this happens to you, I want to encourage you because even here in America, I see those things with families. So because you are accepting, that's the other thing is some people feel guilty when they are at the acceptance stage. Then they feel guilty, like, should I be feeling this way? Should I be accepting? Does that mean I'm a bad person? And I've talked with people that are feeling that way. No, you're not a bad person. Accepting before the rest of your family members is a good thing. You might be the stabilizer for your family, or you might be what your loved one needs. Your loved one might need that person who sees things for the way they are. My mom was very aware that I was seeing things the way they were. We had very candid conversations, very candid. But I have done this for years with many people and their families. So it wasn't new to me as it was for the rest of my family. So I just want to share this with you so that if you have parents, prepare your mind because one day these things are going to happen. It might be terminal disease, or it might be just aging, where the body changes and becomes frail, and um, they might end up dying due to age because they are not eating. Um, they just have a failure to thrive condition where nothing is working out for them, and eventually they end up dying because they are not eating. Their bodies are becoming frail due to age. That can happen too. So having the understanding that there is grief process, and some family members are gonna really act crazy. One of the things I would also like to encourage you is really working on remembering respect. Respect is a big word, because while members are grieving differently, the thing that will keep the family together is respect. Let's all remember that all family members are hurting. There is not a single family member that is not hurting when their loved one has terminal illness. Everybody is hurting. Even those who have accepted, they are hurting. Even those who are in denial, or everybody is hurting. So don't treat people badly or negatively, because some of the ways families treat other family members, it's a passing cloud. Grief is a passing cloud. So people might be very angry and say bad things to their family members, or they might behave in very hurtful ways to their family members. Well, guess what? That season will pass. And one of the ones that the Lord gave me long time ago is be blameless. Be blameless. That word has really helped me in my life. Be blameless. Work at being blameless, because you gotta remember, emotions come and go, seasons come and go, and if you can practice balancing your emotions, you will not have regrets down the road. So if you are being mean to your family members because you're feeling angry, that season will pass, and you might need that family member that you treated very badly. So learn to modify your emotions, even with grief. And it takes practice, and it takes work of intention. But we can all learn and grow. The Bible expects us to grow, to mature, to become Christ like. So there's people who behave badly, but they expect everybody will excuse them. And that's not the reality of life. So as you go through the grieving process with your loved one, number one, know your loved one is grieving and be attentive to their grief. Sometimes all you need is to sit with them and listen. Don't rush to give advice. Every time, rush to give advice. Instead, sit and listen. How are you feeling? What can I do for you? Can I give you a cup of water? Can I peel a fruit for you? Sometimes just sit and listen. And then sometimes you just want to sit with them. I have come to realize that time is a very huge blessing to people when they are grieving. Just time. It's not the things you say. Sometimes we say a lot of damn things, a lot of wrong things that we should not be saying. In the process of trying to be useful and helpful, we say things that are hurtful and that people don't want to hear. For example, if your parents are going through grief, remember they have lived an entire life. Remember they raised you. So when you start giving them advice, when you start telling them, oh, if you do this or if you do that, you're forgetting that they know what they should be doing. They actually know what they should be doing. Remember, they raised you. Same to other people, our family members, whether it's brothers, sisters. When people are dealing with situations, don't be quick to give them advice. Sometimes listen to them. Just listen and hear them out. Before you start advising, first listen very carefully. Ask questions because then you know where somebody is coming from. So, grief is real when it comes to terminal illness. And even our elderly parents are grieving. They are grieving the loss of their nice things, whether it's their nice home. Some people might have cows and chicken and goats, and they love them. And they are grieving. Sometimes they are worried. What will happen to my cows? What will happen to my goats? They are grieving. That doesn't mean they don't have faith. They do have faith. But grief is part of life. And the other side of grief is love. Whenever there's love, there is going to be grief. Because things happen to the people that we love and we grieve. So I wanted to touch on grief today. There's 5 stages of grief. There is denial, there is anger, there is bargaining, there is depression, and there's acceptance. So all these stages are varied. I won't go into details of each of them today. I will down the road. But understanding the stages of grief can help you help your loved one better. It can also help you work better with your family members. And it can also help you be forgiving. Because when you understand people are behaving a certain way because they don't know any better, it's easier to forgive them than when you take things personally and say, that person is hurting me. Because sometimes people hurt us based on their understanding. It's not like they're intending to, but based on their understanding. So when we can understand this thing, we could end up being the most mature one, be like Christ. When you become like Christ, when you mature up, you learn to control your emotions. You don't let your emotions lead you. You don't act on every emotion that you feel, but acknowledge them. It's important to acknowledge your emotions, but don't let your emotions drive you because most times you let your emotions drive you, you will end up regretting. So, thank you so much for joining me. Ibwega sana, Ame Roberto, Ibwega. Share this video and have a very blessed rest of your day. Pray for me to feel better. All right.